My beloved child, there is something about you that your future spouse would not know how to explain, even if they tried. You have become quieter in places where you once felt the need to prove yourself. You have stopped chasing conversations that leave you confused, stopped forcing connections that feel one-sided, and started protecting a part of yourself that you once gave away too easily. And that change is exactly where this story begins. Because somewhere ahead of you, the person who is meant to become your spouse is not simply waiting for a random romantic encounter. They are becoming increasingly restless because something about the way you are living right now is changing the kind of love you will accept later. They may not know your name yet. They may not have seen your face. They may even be living a life that appears completely unrelated to yours. But imagine this: two people can be moving through separate chapters while unknowingly becoming ready for the same chapter. And here is the part you probably did not expect: the reason this person feels unsettled is not because you are doing more to attract them. It is because you are doing less. You are becoming less available to confusion. Less impressed by temporary attention. Less willing to mistake chemistry for commitment. You are slowly becoming the kind of person who can look at someone and say, without saying a word, "If you want a place in my life, you have to come with sincerity." That standard changes everything. And the person who eventually becomes your spouse will feel the impact of that standard before they fully understand why. There is a strange restlessness that appears when someone realizes their old patterns no longer satisfy them. They may go through ordinary days, attend ordinary places, speak to ordinary people, and yet something inside them keeps whispering that the relationship they truly want cannot be built on the same foundation as everything before it. They may not call it your name. They may not even know it is connected to you. But they know something has to change. And what makes this so powerful is that your transformation and their transformation do not have to happen in the same room to be connected within the story of your future. You are becoming harder to impress because you are finally learning what deserves your heart. And there is another layer to this that makes the situation even more fascinating. Your future spouse may be restless because you are becoming emotionally unavailable to the version of love that once kept you waiting. Think about how different that is. You are not becoming cold. You are becoming clear. You are not losing your ability to love. You are learning where your love belongs. There is a difference between closing your heart and closing the door to inconsistency. One is fear. The other is maturity. And somewhere along the road ahead, your future spouse will recognize that difference. They will understand that the person they are meeting is not someone who can be won over with empty words, temporary excitement, or a few impressive gestures. You will be watching what they do when nobody is applauding them. You will notice whether their kindness survives inconvenience. You will notice whether their promises have actions behind them. You will notice whether they bring peace into ordinary moments rather than only excitement into extraordinary ones. That is what makes your future spouse restless in this story, because they are slowly realizing that the kind of relationship they want requires a version of themselves they have not completely become yet. And perhaps that is why their life may feel unusually unsettled right now. They could be questioning choices they once considered permanent. They could be reconsidering what they believed love was supposed to look like. They could be realizing that being admired is not the same as being understood. Being desired is not the same as being valued. Having someone around is not the same as having someone who truly sees you. And while you are becoming more selective, they are becoming more honest with themselves. This is where the title begins to reveal its deeper meaning. Your future spouse is restless because you are changing the standard. You are becoming someone who would rather wait for something genuine than rush into something that looks beautiful from the outside but feels empty on the inside. And when two people reach that point at different times, life can feel strangely unfinished. They may have a sense that something meaningful is missing without being able to identify exactly what it is. That feeling can make ordinary evenings feel longer. It can make certain conversations suddenly feel pointless. It can make someone look around a crowded room and realize they still feel alone. Not because they need someone to rescue them, but because they are finally ready to build something deeper than what they have known before. But wait, because this is where the most unexpected part begins. You may think your future spouse is restless because you are becoming more attractive, more confident, or more independent, and yes, those changes may matter, but the deeper reason is that you are becoming unpredictable to the old version of your own life. You are no longer guaranteed to repeat the same emotional cycle. You are no longer automatically saying yes just because someone finally gives you attention. You are no longer allowing loneliness to make decisions that should be made by wisdom. And that means your future relationship will have to meet you at a completely different level. Picture the moment when your future spouse first realizes that you are not impressed by what impressed everyone else. They say something charming, and you smile, but you look deeper. They tell you about their achievements, and you listen, but you care more about their character. They try to understand what makes you happy, and eventually they discover something almost shocking: you do not need someone to complete your life. You want someone who can genuinely share it. That distinction will change the way they approach you. They may become more intentional, more careful with their words, more interested in knowing the real you instead of simply winning your attention. And the strongest part is that you may not recognize how significant that is at first. You might even wonder why this person seems different. Why do they remember small things? Why do they listen when you speak? Why do they not rush you? Why do they seem strangely comfortable with silence? Why does their presence feel less like a performance and more like recognition? Those questions will matter because the biggest revelation is not that your future spouse will suddenly appear like a character walking into a movie scene. The bigger revelation is that when you finally encounter them, you may realize you have been preparing for this connection through every disappointment that taught you what you will never settle for again. Every time you walked away from something that looked right but felt wrong, you were sharpening your discernment. Every time you chose yourself instead of chasing someone who could not choose you, you were strengthening your standards. Every time you survived a season where you wondered whether genuine love would ever find you, you were becoming capable of recognizing it when it arrived. And your future spouse will sense that. Not because they possess some mysterious knowledge about your past, but because mature love notices what shallow attention overlooks. They will notice your restraint, your emotional depth, the way you can be warm without being desperate, the way you can care deeply without abandoning yourself. And that may be the exact thing that makes them nervous, in the best possible way, because suddenly they realize that meeting you will require them to bring their most honest self to the table. So listen closely to this final thought, because it changes the entire meaning of what you are experiencing right now. Your future spouse may be restless because you are not waiting for them in the way you imagined. You are living. You are growing. You are becoming. You are building a life that does not depend on a relationship arriving at the perfect moment. And ironically, that is what makes the eventual relationship more powerful. You are not sitting still hoping someone will come and give your life meaning. You are becoming someone who already knows their worth, already knows what peace feels like, and already understands that love should add depth rather than erase identity. Somewhere in the future, your spouse may look at you and realize something they could never have understood before meeting you. The person they were searching for was not necessarily the person who demanded their attention the loudest. It was the person whose presence made them want to become more honest, more consistent, more patient, and more intentional. And that is why their restlessness may be growing. Not because they are guaranteed to know exactly who you are today, but because the life they are building is slowly becoming incompatible with the kind of love they once accepted. They are outgrowing something. You are outgrowing something. And eventually, those two paths may cross in a way neither of you could have scheduled. The most surprising part is that your first meeting may not look extraordinary at all. It could happen during an ordinary day, through an ordinary introduction, in an ordinary place. There may be no dramatic music, no perfect timing, no obvious sign written across the sky. Instead, there may simply be a moment when conversation feels unusually natural. A look that lasts 1 second longer than expected. A feeling that says, "Why does this person seem familiar?" And then, slowly, the pieces begin moving. With the kind of love they once accepted. They are outgrowing something. You are outgrowing something. And eventually, those two paths may cross in a way neither of you could have scheduled. The most surprising part is that your first meeting may not look extraordinary at all. It could happen during an ordinary day, through an ordinary introduction, in an ordinary place. There may be no dramatic music, no perfect timing, no obvious sign written across the sky. Instead, there may simply be a moment when conversation feels unusually natural. A look that lasts 1 second longer than expected. A feeling that says, "Why does this person seem familiar?" And then, slowly, the pieces begin moving. Your future spouse starts noticing that you are not like the connections they have known before. You start noticing that their consistency is different. And neither of you realizes immediately how important that difference will become. But remember this, the person you eventually build a life with does not need you to become someone else to deserve their love. They need to meet the person you are becoming right now, the person who is learning to choose substance over appearance, consistency over intensity, and genuine connection over temporary attention. That is the transformation that makes this story worth staying for, because the next chapter is not simply about who your future spouse is. It is about the one thing they notice about you that makes them realize, "I cannot treat this person like everyone else." And that realization is where everything starts to change. There is a reason this connection may feel closer than you realize, because while you are becoming more selective about love, your future spouse is beginning to recognize what they can no longer pretend to be satisfied with. They may have spent years believing that the right relationship would simply happen when the right person appeared, but something inside them is changing that belief. They are beginning to understand that love is not only about finding someone, it is about becoming someone capable of keeping something genuine. And that realization can create a strange restlessness. They may suddenly notice how many conversations around them feel superficial. They may become less interested in temporary attention and more interested in emotional depth. They may hear someone describe a relationship and quietly think, "That is not what I want anymore." They may not know exactly what they are searching for, but they can feel that something is missing. Meanwhile, you are becoming increasingly difficult to distract from your own growth. You are learning to enjoy your own company. You are becoming comfortable with silence. You are discovering that peace can be more valuable than constant excitement. And that is the part that will eventually make your future spouse pause when they encounter you. Because you will not approach them from desperation. You will approach them from discernment. You will not need them to convince you that you are worthy. You will already know it. And strangely enough, that can make someone who is serious about you want to become even more serious. They will sense that your attention cannot simply be purchased with words. Your trust cannot be rushed. Your heart cannot be unlocked by pretending to be someone they are not. You will notice inconsistencies that you once might have ignored. You will hear what they say, but you will pay even closer attention to what happens afterward. And your future spouse may realize something that changes their entire approach. With you, they cannot simply perform love. They have to practice it. They have to show up when the excitement fades. They have to communicate when silence would be easier. They have to keep choosing the relationship after the first beautiful moments become ordinary life. And that is precisely why this story becomes so much deeper than a simple, "someone is coming" message. The real shift is that you are becoming ready for a relationship that survives reality, not just romance. You are becoming ready for someone who understands that the strongest love is often revealed in the smallest moments, the check-in after a long day, the patience during a misunderstanding, the willingness to listen without immediately defending themselves, the quiet reassurance that says, "You do not have to carry everything alone." Your future spouse is restless because the kind of love they are beginning to desire is no longer something they can fake. And somewhere inside them, they know that when they finally meet the right person, they will have to bring their whole heart with them. Something else is happening beneath the surface, and this is where the story becomes almost impossible to ignore. You are becoming less predictable to people who once thought they understood you. They may have expected you to keep chasing, explaining, forgiving, waiting, or returning. But you are learning that love should not require you to constantly negotiate for basic consideration. You are learning that being deeply loving does not mean being endlessly available to everyone. And this new version of you creates a completely different future. Imagine your future spouse hearing about you before they truly know you. Maybe someone casually mentions your name. Maybe they encounter your presence through a shared connection. Maybe you cross paths without realizing that this ordinary moment will eventually become a story you both tell. At first, there may be nothing dramatic about it. But your future spouse notices something. You are not trying to impress anyone. You are not desperately seeking approval. You are simply present. And that calmness catches their attention. They may wonder why you seem different. They may notice that you are listening more than speaking. They may notice that you smile without needing the entire room to notice. They may notice the way you treat someone who cannot offer you anything in return. And that tiny detail could become bigger than any grand romantic gesture because character is often revealed when nobody thinks they are being watched. Your future spouse may begin to realize that the qualities they once overlooked are now the qualities they desperately want. They may have chased excitement before, but now they want stability. They may have been impressed by confidence, but now they want emotional honesty. They may have valued appearance, but now they understand the beauty of someone who makes them feel safe enough to be real. And the more they understand this, the more restless they become about the life they are currently living. Not because their life is necessarily bad, but because their priorities are changing. The old version of their future is losing its appeal. They are beginning to imagine something more meaningful. And here is the revelation you should hold on to: the relationship you eventually build may feel completely different from the relationships you once thought you wanted. It may not begin with overwhelming intensity. It may begin with curiosity, with comfort, with a conversation that somehow lasts longer than either of you expected, with the strange realization that you can speak freely without carefully editing every sentence. And then comes the moment that changes everything. Your future spouse sees you handle something difficult with grace. Maybe you disagree. Maybe something goes wrong. Maybe plans change. And instead of becoming someone else under pressure, you remain yourself. That is when they may understand that your value is not simply in how beautiful the beginning feels. Your value is in who you remain when life becomes ordinary. And that is when their restlessness becomes clarity. Now pay attention to the part most people overlook. Your future spouse may not be restless because they are impatient to meet you. They may be restless because they are realizing they have been preparing for you without knowing it. Every lesson they learned about communication. Every relationship that taught them what inconsistency feels like. Every moment when they realized attention without intention means very little. Every time they promised themselves they would never again ignore their own emotional truth. Those experiences may be shaping the person who eventually stands in front of you. And your own experiences are doing something similar. You are not being asked to sit around and wait for a perfect person. You are being shaped into someone who can recognize a healthy connection when it appears. That distinction matters. Because if you meet someone genuine while still believing that love must be chaotic to be exciting, you could overlook them. If you believe someone must constantly make you anxious to prove that you care, you could misunderstand peace as boredom. If you believe love has to be difficult to be meaningful, you might fail to recognize the extraordinary beauty of something that simply works. But you are changing. You are learning to distinguish intensity from intimacy, attraction from compatibility, promises from patterns. And that education of the heart is preparing you for something very different. Your future spouse may eventually look at you and wonder how someone can feel so familiar while still being completely new. They may feel like they have known your energy for years even though the relationship has only just begun. But do not rush past the significance of that moment. The most powerful part may be what happens afterward. Instead of disappearing when things become real, they stay. Instead of creating confusion, they communicate. Instead of keeping you guessing, they make their intentions increasingly obvious through their actions. And you may initially struggle to believe it because your mind remembers every time someone said the right thing and then did the opposite. You may wait for the pattern to repeat. You may believe someone must constantly make you anxious to prove that you care. You could misunderstand peace as boredom. If you believe love has to be difficult to be meaningful, you might fail to recognize the extraordinary beauty of something that simply works. But you are changing. You are learning to distinguish intensity from intimacy, attraction from compatibility, promises from patterns. And that education of the heart is preparing you for something very different. Your future spouse may eventually look at you and wonder how someone can feel so familiar while still being completely new. They may feel like they have known your energy for years even though the relationship has only just begun. But do not rush past the significance of that moment. The most powerful part may be what happens afterward. Instead of disappearing when things become real, they stay. Instead of creating confusion, they communicate. Instead of keeping you guessing, they make their intentions increasingly obvious through their actions. And you may initially struggle to believe it because your mind remembers every time someone said the right thing and then did the opposite. You may wait for the pattern to repeat. You may look for the hidden reason. You may wonder when the warmth will disappear. But then they keep showing up. One day. Then another. Then another. And slowly, something inside you begins to soften, not because they forced it open, but because their consistency gave you a reason to stop protecting yourself from something that no longer feels like a threat to your peace. That is the kind of connection your future spouse may be restless about without even knowing your identity yet. A connection where neither person has to perform. A relationship where both people can breathe. A bond where love does not need to be constantly questioned because it is demonstrated through ordinary behavior. And here is the revelation that may stay with you long after this story ends. Your future spouse may eventually realize that the person they were waiting for was becoming ready at the exact same time they were. Not necessarily on the same calendar day, not through some perfect sequence, but through a gradual transformation that neither of you could see while it was happening. You were learning to stop accepting less. They were learning to stop offering less. You were becoming clearer about what you needed. They were becoming clearer about what they needed to give. You were becoming comfortable standing alone. They were learning that partnership should never mean losing yourself. And when those two lessons finally meet, the connection can feel unusually strong because neither person is arriving empty-handed. You are bringing your growth. They are bringing theirs. You are bringing your boundaries. They are bringing their maturity. You are bringing the lessons that taught you what genuine love should feel like. They are bringing the lessons that taught them how genuine love must be maintained. That is why the future spouse in this story is restless. Something in them knows that the next meaningful chapter cannot be built using the same habits that created the old chapters. And the most surprising thing is that you may be closer to that turning point than you think, not because there is a guaranteed date or predetermined moment, but because the person you are becoming is increasingly aligned with the kind of relationship you say you want. Your future spouse will not be impressed only by the way you look. They will be captivated by the way you carry yourself. They will notice that you do not need to dominate every conversation to have presence. They will notice that you can love without losing your identity. They will notice that you can forgive without pretending nothing happened. They will notice that you can walk away from what does not honor you without becoming bitter. And eventually, they may ask themselves the question that makes this entire story worth remembering: how did I spend so much time looking for something I did not even know how to recognize until now? Because when they finally see you clearly, the restless feeling may begin to make sense. It was never about chasing a stranger. It was about becoming ready for someone whose presence would make their old definition of love feel too small. And the moment they recognize that, the story does not end.